Good morning. I am Lovely Grace F. Sampaga, and our topic for today is about stages of language development. Language development begins before birth. Towards the end of pregnancy, a fetus begins to hear sounds and speech coming from outside the mother's body. Infants are acutely attuned to the human voice and prefer it to other sounds. In particular, they prefer the higher pitch characteristic of female voices. We know that the newborn child has not seen so much, but they can hear the voices of the people around them. They also are very attentive to the human face, especially when the face is talking. Although crying is a child's primary means of communication at birth, language immediately begins to develop via repetition and imitation. The stages of language development are universal among humans. However, the age and the pace of which a child reaches each milestone of language development vary greatly among children. Thus, language development in an individual child must be compared with norms rather than with other individual children. In general, girls develop language at a faster rate than boys. More than any other aspect of development, language development reflects the growth and maturation of the brain. After the age of 5, it becomes much more difficult for most children to learn language. So as we can observe to the other parents, they are talking to their infant babies just to adapt and to learn language. It's either English, Filipino, Spanish, Korean, etc. Stages of language development. The fourth stage of language development is multiple word sentences. The child reaches this stage between the age of 2 and 2.5. Grammatical morphemes in the form of prefixes and suffixes are used when changing meanings or tenses. Furthermore, the child can now form sentences with subject and predicate. Subject means a person or thing that is being discussed, described, or dealt with. Predicate means the part of a sentence that tells us what the subject does or is. Example, doggy is big. So our subject here is doggy and our predicate is big. The next example here is where is ball. Our subject here is ball and our predicate is where. The listening skills of the child between the age of 2 and 2.5 responds to familiar requests like come here, understands gestures like wave for bye, like this. Their vocabulary skills, bubbling like mama for mother and dada for daddy, takes turns vocalizing with others and recognizing names of a few subjects. Yet, no specific milestones for sentences, verbal grammar, and concepts. About questions, they can understand one keyword in a sentence, like, where is your nose? There are possible implications if milestone not achieved. The first one, they may have difficulties socializing with parents and joint attention. The next one, they may struggle to copy and learn from others due to poor understanding and attention. The child's sentences are still telegraphic, although they may be quite long. An example of such a multiple word sentence is people mustn't walk straight or people must walk pavement. This specific sentence was used by a very bright 18-month-old child, which implies that these language development levels can be reached at an earlier age or at a later age than the age of 2 and 2.5. The extent and quality of the mediated language experience which the child receives are therefore of the utmost importance. The fifth stage of language development is more complex grammatical structures. Children reach this stage roughly between 2.5 and 3 years of age. They use more intricate and complex grammatical structures. Elements are added, embedded, and permuted within sentences, and prepositions are used. Their listening skills follows two-part instructions like go to your room and get your shoes. The next one, they point to the main body parts, clothing items, toys, and food when asked. The vocabulary skills of a child on this stage is that they can name actions like go and run. By 2 years, vocabulary is 250 to 300 words. By 3 years uses, they can provide 1,000 words. Their sentences skills is that minimum of 2 to 3 words in a sentence like daddy, go work. And then at the same time, they can also still talk to a self in long monologues. Their verbal grammar talks about present events like birthday and also regular plurals like one dog or two dogs. One example of their verbal grammar is articles like a and the. Progressive ing like the boy is jumping. They can also use his pronouns like you, I, me, and mine. The regular past tense example is I climbed. Possessive, an example here is daddy's car. Here are some examples for their concepts like position, on and off, in and out, up and down, under and top, open and close. There another concept is sizes like big, small, little, long, and short. Quantity for 1 and 2, and the other is stop, go, start, loud, quiet, heavy, soft, fast, hot, and cold. About questions, they can also understand and ask what and where questions. These are possible implications if milestones not achieved on this stage. Number 1. May have difficulties socializing with peers and joint attention. May struggle to copy and learn from others due to poor understanding and attention. May have difficulties following instructions. May have difficulties being understood by peers. May have difficulties being understood by unfamiliar people. And the last one, they may have difficulties expressing wants, needs, thoughts, and ideas. The sixth stage of language development is adult-like language structures. The 5 to 6-year-old child reaches this developmental level. Complex structural distinction can now be made, such as by using the concepts like ask, tell, promise, and changing the word order in the sentence accordingly. Examples. Asked her what time is it. Our next example is he promised to help her. Their listening skills follows the meaning of others' conversation. They can also follow multi-step instructions, and vocabulary comprehension increases. For their sentence skills, they use more complex sentences. They can also use imaginative language in play, likes to pretend and act out stories. They can also tell several attributes about an object. For their verbal grammar skills, they have irregular past tense like fell, broke, and ate. Their concept skills on this stage is the time like yesterday, tomorrow, morning, afternoon, and later. They can also use how and where questions. Possible implications if milestone not achieved. The first one is they may have difficulties socializing, maybe because they are shy. They may also have poor attention and concentration and may have difficulties following instruction at home or at school. Because we all know that a child is naughty and they just want to play and play and play. They may also have difficulties retelling events, they may have difficulties following routines, and they may have difficulties being understood by unfamiliar people. Because we all know some children are still stammered. So some people can understand what they want to say or just what they want to tell about. They may have difficulties expressing thoughts and ideas verbally and in written form. They may also have difficulties responding appropriately to questions and word finding difficulties causing disfluent speech. Language development in children is remarkable for its regularity across individuals and different languages, even when the languages are quite diverse. Children universally progress through many of the same stages, mastering certain components of the grammar before others and making characteristic errors in production and comprehension of each stage. Despite individual differences in intelligence and other abilities, and despite normal differences in language exposure, all children end up able to speak and understand their native language fluently. This is in marked contrast to adult learners, who show much greater variability in learning processes and ultimate outcomes. Indeed, differences between children and adult learners in ultimate outcomes, in the kinds of errors made, and in the stages of acquisition have led many researchers to conclude and that there is a critical or sensitive period for language development. As in other developmental domains, with critical periods, learning that takes place outside this period is more variable and less robust, leading to a greater range of outcomes and more idiosyncratic patterns of acquisition. In addition to the uniform patterns of acquisition across languages, there are some aspects of language development that are tied more closely to structural properties of the particular language being learned. Comparing components that are more or less language dependent can lead to insights about the learning mechanisms involved in language development and the properties of the linguistic input to which learners attend.